I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championships.
The rivalries, it's up there on top of the list, man. And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. And welcome to JUCK on Bucks. Appreciate you so much for joining me. A lot of Louisiana folks are pretty stunned with Blaine Bradford, a kid whose brother is at LSU, a kid from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, leaving the state for another choice, but not Texas, who was also in his top three, for Ohio State. And to understand how infuriating this is to Louisiana folks, you got to understand how folks in the SEC feel about Ohio State. Louisiana, like Ohio State, not used to losing their in-state talent. And when they do, the rare occasion that they do, it's to Georgia, it's to Bama, it might be to Texas here and there. And last year, when they lost their number one recruit, Jakeem Stewart, to a Big Ten school, to USC, they blamed it all on money. Jakeem Stewart took a visit out to USC, and automatically USC was the school. Shortly after that, he committed. And to be honest, it was about money. So that one didn't really feel like that kind of loss to them. You know, they chalked it up as you do when you think a kid leaves for money. He's got his priorities wrong. He'll see, blah, blah, blah. He'll transfer out of there. That was the tone to that one. This one, much different, as they've lost Blaine Bradford to Ohio State. And they view Ohio State as so inferior, it would blow your mind. LSU historically can't touch Ohio State, neither can Georgia. But if you were to listen to their fans talk about Ohio State, you would be stunned. They talk about Ohio State like we would talk about Michigan State. They really do, which makes the Blaine Bradford commitment so doggone exciting. I love it. I love to rub it in, and I have been on social media. But what would a win be with Tyler Atkinson? And what would make it even sweeter is to win with Tyler Atkinson over Georgia. Tyler Atkinson, the number one linebacker in the country. Tyler Atkinson, the number one linebacker in the country for a couple of cycles, in my opinion. This is one of the rare guys that you can look at and say, wow, haven't seen one of those in like 3 years. He is ridiculous. Buckeyes in his top three. Ultimately, I don't think he's going to be at Ohio State. But it does lead us to an interesting conversation about James Laurinaitis. Right now, there's something coming down the pipeline that I want to talk. So James Laurinaitis, a guy who in his first year at Ohio State was able to land the commitment of his top two targets, Riley Pettijohn out of Texas. Riley Pettijohn, we just talked about yesterday. His parents, his family, I compared to Blaine Bradford's. For people who are worried about him not sticking to his commitment, the Sanchez family as well, just seem like similar folks. And TJ Alford from Florida. And those two were two of the top 10 linebackers in the country. We're talking about big-time recruits that everybody wanted. And then he added three-star Eli Lee from up in my city here in Akron. Eli was actually the first guy that committed to the class. But that was your class right there for James's first class. Now, in the class of 2026, James's second class, Tyler Atkinson, clearly the number one guy on the board for Ohio, for everybody. But when we look at the other three linebackers that are probably the most likely 1, 2, 3 linebackers in this class, if we were to say, all right, who was, we got to bet, who are the three guys that are going to be in this class at linebacker? We're going to bet these three. That's going to be CJ Sana out of Lewis Center, out of Olatanji High School. That one's about as done as it gets. Then you got Sincere Johnson out of Cleveland Glenville. Now, Sincere is now a top 50 player in the country. With that came a whole lot of attention from elsewhere. And that one's going to come down to Ohio State and Alabama. Sincere from Glenville, but got family in Alabama, and he's certainly entertaining it quite a bit. This day and age, anything can happen with these guys, and we can look and say, hey, that's a kid from Glenville. He's going to Ohio State, and in the rare occasion Ohio State loses, he's going to Michigan. That's what we've seen historically from Glenville kids. But that's what Louisiana people were saying about Blaine Bradford out of Catholic High School in Baton Rouge on Monday morning. That's what we were saying about CJ Sana's teammate at Olentangy High School, Caden Gephardt, 2 weeks ago before he committed to Clemson. Things are different now. Ultimately, I do think Sincere Johnson is a Buckeye. And then you got Storm Miller out of Strongsville, who is now entertaining West Virginia. This is an interesting cat. This is all football all the time. A football guy, if there ever was one, and that's why I think he ends up at Ohio State playing for James Laurinaitis. And I think that's the linebacker trio for 2026. I really do. Now, when we look at James Laurinaitis, you're now talking about, assuming that's the three that come into this class, 6 total linebackers in 2 classes, and 4 of them Ohio kids, which is pretty doggone interesting. I don't think it's by accident. Those 3 this year in the class, if it's CJ Sana, Storm Miller, and Sincere Johnson, they're not the top 3 linebackers in the class. They're not the top, these aren't like your top guys. And it just feels like it's intentional to me. Now, let's go to 2027, because here's where it gets really interesting, as Ohio State just offered 2027's number 1 linebacker in the class, in the country, the number 1 guy. His name's Antoine Wiggins, and he just happens to be another Ohio kid out of Cincinnati Anderson. We're talking about an Arvell Reese type of athlete here, listed at 6'3". But here's a picture of him and James Laurinaitis. Now, James is 6'3", of that I'm certain, a legit 6'3". This is James next to my brother, and I know my brother's 5'11" on the dot because I just measured him not too long ago. Now, James is wearing a hat. Just look at the eye level, look at the shoulder level. You can see that's a clear 4 inches. Now, look at Antoine and James Laurinaitis. That kid's definitely got James by a couple of inches here. He's not 6'3". And this is another one that looks absolutely enamored standing next to James Laurinaitis. Look at the look on his face. By the way, looks like he's 25, right? But so many of these linebackers, when they meet James, like that's the look. Like, oh my gosh, look at this dude. And what a benefit that is of having James Laurinaitis. But how amazing would it be if James Laurinaitis landed Eli Lee, then 3 more Ohio linebackers in 26, and then the number 1 linebacker in the country, also out of the state of Ohio in 2027. Wouldn't that be great? Wait, there's more. The number 2 linebacker in the country in 2027 happens to be our guy, Brayton Feaster, up here in Akron, Ohio. I know I've showed you his film several times. That means the number 1 and the number 2 linebacker in the country in 2027, 2 Ohio kids, along with the number 1 wide receiver in the country, Jameer Brown, already committed in the class of 2027 out of Wayne High School, and the number 2 quarterback in the country, Brady Edmonds, out of California, already committed. And the class of 2027 could look like the class of 2021. Could this get any cooler? Could it get any cooler than a class like that? And James Laurinaitis going back to back with 5 Ohio linebackers in 2 classes, including the number 1 and the number 2 linebacker. I'm pumped, guys. I'm pumped for this one. And now we're going to talk to our buddy Dillon Davis. Dillon from the Delaware Gazette. Follow him at Dillon Davis 56. That's Dillon 56 on X. Always got the cool videos coming from the Woody. And he and I are going to get into some tight ends, some linebackers, Arvell Reese's insane trajectory, and the defensive line. But we start today's conversation with Devin Sanchez. And before we do, please do like and subscribe. I really appreciate it if you guys can handle that for me. Now here's me and Dillon here with him. Another incredibly talented player, Devin Sanchez. The buzz is continuing to pick up steam. We've been talking about him, since he was a recruit. Mm-hmm. And before he committed, and now here he is. He's on campus. He's making a big splash. And we are hearing a lot of other folks in the media talk about Devin Sanchez as the Jeremiah Smith of the defense. I don't like hearing that, to be honest. Like, I don't know, man. That's putting a whole lot on a guy. Jeremiah Smith is going to be a dude who is, like, we're already talking about potentially making our Mount Rushmores. The odds of that happening back-to-back years, probably not too high. And honestly, when we look at a guy like Jeff Okudah, who was amazing at Ohio State, a top 3 draft pick, I think that Devin Sanchez can be that. I really do. But that still isn't Jeremiah Smith level. Like, that's not what that is. That's something totally different. What are your thoughts on how this is going? People saying that about him, and sorry.
Yeah, I get it. Just because from the standpoint I mentioned, going back to the first couple of days of spring practice and just looking out there, and he looks different than a lot of guys. Certainly when you factor in, the fact that he's a true freshman, he looks different. So from that standpoint, I understand why people are saying, like, oh, he's the Jeremiah Smith of the defense, because he does. He looks different, and he looks like the prototype, as Jeremiah did, for the position he plays. It's absolutely unfair to like put any sort of even like halfway expectations on Devin Sanchez that he could have a Jeremiah type impact. Partially because of the position he plays. Like Devin Sanchez isn't going to have the opportunity, the pathway to making that kind of impact on the field this year. It's just not, at least certainly not early as well, where it was very obvious, when you look at a receiver of JJ's stature, it was very obvious, like that guy's going to make an impact right away, and they're going to they're going to make sure that he makes an impact. It's not that, cut and dry with when we're talking about a cornerback. So it's absolutely unfair. And look, Devin Sanchez could go on to have an Antoine Winfield type career at Ohio State, or, one of those guys and be one of the greats at his position ever, and still not be what I think JJ is destined to become. And like you mentioned with the Mountain Rushmore stuff in Ohio State lore. So that's kind of a tough, but I get it as well. And I don't know if people are saying that he's the Jeremiah Smith of defense because he looks a little bit different than most true freshmen do, or if they're saying that because they think he's going to come in and play right away and be an All-American caliber cornerback, because I don't know. I don't really believe that. I'm not going to say that there isn't a point where he gets a lot of playing time this year for one reason or another. I can't predict that, but I don't see Devin Sanchez being the immediate, like, if he was draft eligible tomorrow, he'd be a top 5 pick. I'm not sure that we're there yet. So that's a little unfair to put that on the guy, and that's saying nothing of his talent, because he might be talented enough to be that guy. For all I know, we're still very early in seeing it, but just all those comments for me, and when I talk about him, it's just from the sense that he looks different physically than most true freshmen should, and because of how big he is, he's just a prototype for that. But production-wise, there doesn't seem like there's a pathway for him to have that kind of impact right away that Jeremiah had. And that's not saying anything less of Devin Sanchez. It's different. It's not apples to apples.
On Thursday, got to hear from the tight ends, the linebackers. Keenan Bailey came into last year telling his room, you guys are the least talented room on the team. We got to be the toughest. And heading into this season, it just might be one of the best Ohio State rooms that's ever been on the team. When we look at the talent here, there's a whole heck of a lot. Max Clare, got to hear from him, and it certainly sounds like this guy absolutely fits in, got all the maturity, came to Ohio State for all the right reasons, wanted the hard coaching, liked the criticism from Keenan Bailey, and seems like that's going to work out just great. Listening to Will Kazmarek, another super mature guy who just clearly gets it, Christian Bennett as well. And the one guy who maybe was lacking in that category, we talked about it last year with the way Ryan Day kind of said it without saying it in a couple of press conferences, that Jelani needs to lock in.
Yeah.
And Keenan Bailey made it a point to say the maturity we're seeing out of Jelani is like we've never seen before. Like it's just leaps and bounds ahead of where it's ever been. And I think that maybe was the last thing we needed to see from Jelani before he was a guy getting a lot of playing time on this team.
Yeah, without question. I mean, the consistency word gets thrown around with him all the time, or did last year all the time, about Jelani and, the physical talent and the ability to make plays. If he can just start to do a consistency, and not just consistently making plays, but consistently doing the things that he's supposed to be doing, being where he's supposed to be, and all those things that come with playing any position. So if that's the case, that certainly bodes well for Jelani. Kind of like the receiver room. I don't know where playing time for all these guys who have, 2.5 have proven that like they can already do it in this Ohio State offense. And if Jelani indeed is starting to become more consistent and more mature in his approach and all that, then he becomes, a full third. So there's 3 guys. And then, by the way, Max Clare's the best of the 3, and just in terms of raw talent. So what do you do with all that? I don't know, but it's a good place to work from, and how they can scheme up, getting multiple tight ends on the field on a regular basis in different ways. Will be interesting to see. We've never been in a position like this, at least not in my lifetime at Ohio State. We're talking about how do you get, multiple tight ends on the field, like willingly, not just in heavy run packages. So that's it. That'll be interesting to see.
Dillon, when we look at this team, like in totality, like I just feel that this program is in a space when it comes to talent acquisition that we're just looking at so many rooms that are so incredibly deep with guys that are ready to play that it, really makes the defensive line stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
But really, if we're going back, I don't know, 10, 15 years from now, like that looks like a great defensive line. Like, yeah, sure. You don't know what backups are ready to play. Like that used to be like the normal thing. You didn't really know what backups were going to pop. That was the thing. Now we're just expecting in every room. Like we already know that the guys in the 2 deep can play and will eventually be starters and are good already. I think it just goes to show the elevation of the program and the standing that it's in right now is just through the roof. It's just fantastic.
And it's harder than ever to maintain that as well. Given the landscape of college football, it's harder than ever to ensure that you have that. And maybe eventually Ohio State will start to kind of feel the strain of that. But as of right now, where they're at, considering how easy it is to poach talent from other programs, the fact that they have so many, I don't want to say sure things, but known commodities and talented known commodities and capable known commodities at so many positions across the 2 deep. I mean, it's in a fantastic spot. What that ultimately means certainly is left, still to be determined. But it's a fantastic spot to be in, and it's a place to program we've never seen it in. And again, part of that is because of the changing landscape of college football. It's different than it was when you or I were growing up. But it's the roster. The roster shakeup or the shakeout the way that it's constructed is as good as it's ever been and in a better place than it's ever been right now. And it seems like this is a whole nother conversation, a bigger conversation. It seems like Ohio State's so close, or they're on the cusp of potentially running off something really special over a sustained period of time, a la what we saw. I'm not saying it's going to be like that, or what we've seen from Alabama in the past, or even the kind of the run that Georgia's been on recently. Ohio State's on the cusp of running off that kind of run because every piece is in place there. You just have to go out there and win the football game. So,
yeah. When we look at losses in the transfer portal of consequence, I think Hero and Mitchell Melton certainly sting. I'm kind of hoping they maybe address some of that in the spring portal. Larry seems like he's not ready to go there yet. Certainly doesn't want to talk about yet. And why would he? He's got his guys he's trying to coach up now. But Ryan Day did mention that's an area of concern, and we'll see what happens there. Back to those tight ends, though. Nate Roberts told a story. Nate Roberts, for those that don't know, literally from Norman, Oklahoma, right? And his brother had transferred in to play at Oklahoma, guy who grew up a Sooners fan. How do you get that kid out of Oklahoma? And he basically just said Keenan was just a dog, man. He out-hustled Oklahoma and pulled that kid out of their backyard. And I thought it was a really enlightening story. And I think it really kind of is, when we talk about Ohio and the top 10 kids in Ohio now are national recruits in a way they never been. Maybe the top 2 would be years past. And now it's just like the top 10 kids, national recruits, Bama, Georgia, everybody, Oregon coming after them. And we're seeing these guys now be more prone to leaving. We're seeing more guys leave. And quite honestly, it's at a time where Ohio talent, it's been a long time since it's been as good as it has been recently. We've got some top dogs here, and it goes deep. And I just thought it was a really interesting story and a parallel there that you cannot get out hustled for your hometown dudes. You just can't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is something that I'm sure it's not, it happens a lot of places. And even to some degree, I can understand why it happens. You feel like you've got a guy, in your backyard or in your home state, where you can always circle back to them. They're just there. It's almost like a known commodity. Like, hey, we have this in our back pocket. Let's see what else we can go get and kind of leverage that. And that's just not the case. Or you lose guys like Nate Roberts, who's from Norman, Oklahoma, and he's not going to be a Sooner. He made the comment that, like, well, obviously, you grew up in Norman, like this is what you do. If you're gonna have the opportunity, of course you're going to go to OU. And I think coaches take that same approach, or they kind of fall victim to that same mentality that you're a guy from Northeast Ohio, of course you're going to come be a Buckeye, or if you're a guy even in Central Ohio, of course they're going to be Buckeyes. If we offer them, like, they're going to come. It's just a matter if we want them or not. And that approach gets you burned, especially now, as you mentioned, because these guys have national appeal and so many more offers than they did in the past, and opportunities than they did in the past. So I understand how that can happen to some degree. We've seen it happen at Ohio State, and it cost them some guys. But it's certainly the perfect cautionary tale of you can't assume anything with these guys, because at the end of the day, these guys, for all the opportunities they're going to have, they're going to go where they feel most wanted, and where they feel like guys truly are putting in the effort for them. And so good on Ohio State for that. And I hope that this very conversation. Those guys in the Woody are a hell of a lot smarter than we are. So hopefully they, that if there was any element of that whatsoever, hopefully that's a perfect example of, we need to start prioritizing these in-state kids, and the way Ohio State's doing in state right now, maybe, hopefully that bodes well for the future.
Things are looking good. A lot of in-state recruits right now.
Yep.
The offensive line have been on fire. We got 3 dudes now in the class with Max Riley, then Sam Greer, and now Tucker Smith out of Arizona. Really like the direction it's going in a year that we need not just a lot of talent,
right,
but we need big numbers, 6, maybe even 7 guys. Things are looking really well with Tyler Bowen being on the job just 6 weeks. Some people trying to downplay the fact that, okay, let's slow our roll. These are 2 Ohio kids, but to the point, that's not a lock anymore.
Right.
These guys both had other schools that they were in on very, very big. And not only did Tyler Bowen get him to commit earlier than they were planning on, they were planning on taking their, Sam was going to take his OVs over the summer. He ends up shutting it down. And he had his offensive line coach at Ohio State switch in between the process. I think it's incredibly impressive. And I'm kind of shocked, really. I felt the energy, but I'm just like, the way this has gone so far, this is like through the roof energy and excitement amongst linemen for Ohio State right now under Tyler Bowen so far. It's been great.
No, it's been a lot of fun to see. And certainly there are still plenty of big fish out there. You talked about how big that offensive line class could potentially be this year, and they need it. Certainly, I want to say one thing. I've never been of the mindset. I know a lot of Ohio State fans, I hear this all the time about, focusing not solely, but focusing primarily on recruiting Ohio kids and then supplementing that with, national talent outside of that. And I've never, ever been of that mindset, not at a place like Ohio State. Now, if you're telling me that all things are equal and there's an Ohio kid you can get, or a kid from Tennessee, yeah, give me the Ohio kid. Obviously, I love seeing these Ohio kids come to Ohio State and be difference makers for Ohio State. But like, Ohio State needs to recruit nationally by and large. Like their sole goal should be to go out and get the best players at the best positions. And if that's in Ohio in a particular class, great. If not, then, then so be it. But when you have these guys, and certainly at a place and at a position like offensive line where you need so many numbers, like you've got to go get the best in Ohio in those particular situations as well. And I especially feel that way at offensive line, because I always think that there are guys in the state of Ohio in the offensive line where, when you need so many numbers or so many bodies in a particular class for that, there's always plenty of talent in the state of Ohio. So, I don't want anybody to, I can't tell anybody what they should think, but I don't like hearing that, like, well, Ohio State just needs to focus solely on the state of Ohio, or primarily on the state of Ohio, and then just get what you can outside of that. That's not gonna lead to a long-term success for Ohio State. So, but certainly sprinkling in both elements, which it seems like that's where Ohio State's heading in this class. That's certainly really encouraging to see.
Yeah, always very dependent on the talent in the state. When we talk about Max Riley and Sam Greer, we're talking about top 200 overall guys that everybody in the country wants. So, yeah, those kids from Ohio you got to have. Then there are always stories where you get an under-recruited guy rated in the thousands, a 3-star kid who does great. But, if those top guys aren't in Ohio that cycle and you're just focusing on Ohio, that's generally not going to pay off big for you, is your point I think you're making here. And
yeah,
you're absolutely right. Last year, getting to these linebackers, Arvell Reese was, matter of fact, Dillon, I had this short that it was from a show that you and I did, and I posted this short. It was after like week 3, and Arvell was playing great, clearly better than Sonny at that point. And my contention was he should be getting as much opportunity. Your contention was, I don't disagree, but he's only playing Mike right now. He doesn't know Will.
Right.
I don't know what you do here, which, obviously both valid points and both true. He should have been working at Will at that point, or known it, because he's the perfect Will. Anyway, everybody praising Arvell now. Matt Patricia comes in his first 2 times at the podium. He's talking about Arvell. James talking about him, his eyes are lighting up, and the things these guys are saying, it's just pairing him next to Sonny, going to be super successful. But I thought the most interesting thing, listening to James talk, there'd been a lot of talk about, we think Payton Pierce is that number 3 man, but, maybe potentially Riley Pettijohn is so amazing in his freshman year. He ends up taking up some of that playing time. Boy, it sure doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. The way James is talking about Payton Pierce, it seems like we've got a dude here. I mean, he had the glint in his eye. He said he's a natural, went on about his wrestling background. Payton seems like he is not just a guy in that linebacker room, but a dude we're going to see a whole lot of.
Even going back to last year, the way James Laurinaitis talked about Payton Pierce, like I'm not saying that he's James's favorite in the sense that he's playing favorites, but even going back to last year, James Laurinaitis was very clearly a huge fan of Payton Pierce, and he was still kind of trying to find his way as well, still very young. But listening to James Laurinaitis talk about Payton Pierce last week, this guy. I mean, it sounds like if Ohio State needed a middle linebacker, tomorrow or in the second half of the Texas game, that like James Laurinaitis is perfectly comfortable putting him in there and feeling like Payton Pierce is going to play and play well. When he talks about just his natural ability to feel his way through the box and play the position, he called him a throwback player in that sense. So now that's a double-edged sword. I called him a throwback player because it's not a throwback game. So like, I was kind of, when he said that, I was like, okay, well, that's good in the sense, if you're playing in that sort of football game, but what if you're not? So, but it sounds like James Laurinaitis has the utmost confidence in Payton Pierce. And even going back to last year, the way he talked about him, it was just a little bit different than maybe he talked about other guys in that same position. So it sounds like they're absolutely at least 3 deep at linebacker for sure, because I think maybe in the same way that Arvell was last year, that's Payton Pierce now going into this year. So
yeah, talked about the freshmen, had good things to say about Eli Lee and Riley Pettijohn, and then he talked about TJ Alford, who we got to hear talk. Man, TJ's just awesome.
Yeah.
But TJ had a really funny story about them telling him down in Florida, like they don't play Florida kids up at Ohio State. And he's like, when you look at it, that's not true. And he starts naming off the Florida kids. Pretty funny that's how they try to get him to stay home down there. They don't play you at Ohio State. But James Laurinaitis was talking about TJ and said he had 2 dropped picks at practice and he was getting on them. And then a picture comes out of TJ yesterday and he's literally got a cast on his left hand.
Yeah. Hey, that's the standard,
I thought
right?
That was great that James was getting on about dropping picks with a cast on his hand.
Ryan always talks about the standard as the standard, so I guess that's the standard. So,
I absolutely
love it. I think James called them MBPOs, missed big play opportunities that they get graded for. It's just a minus on the grading scale when they're grading film, which is tough. But he even acknowledged, kind of after he said that they were still good plays. But again, going back to the standard, go make the play. So, but talking to TJ and talking to Riley was fantastic. Getting our first chance to meet with them. Both sound like great kids. Both pretty well spoken for sitting in front of the media for the first time as true freshmen. I've been on the record again, and I'll just continue to say it every time I get the opportunity. I'm a huge Riley Pettijohn fan. I think the world of that kid. I think he has such a great future. He said I think he's 227 now, so he's already put on like 12 pounds since he got to Ohio State in just a short amount of time. I think he's aiming to be around 230, I believe he said. So Riley Pettijohn at 230. He seems like he's certainly a guy who could just do it all on the field. And I'm certainly really excited about him and TJ as well. But going back to Arvell real quick, I've made this comment before with Jeremiah, obviously being the kind of the leader in this, but if you ever wanted to just, show somebody like, hey, what's up? Like they don't know the game of football. And you say, what's a football player supposed to be like, look like, and you show them Arvell. He's one of the most impressive physical human beings I've ever seen, at Ohio State. It's amazing. And then when you factor in Sonny as well, like those 2 guys playing linebacker, I don't think we've ever seen more impressive physical specimens playing linebacker side by side than those 2 guys. I think Arvell Reese has a chance to be, man, I don't want to put a ceiling on it, but I think he has a chance to have just a massive, massive year. When I say massive year, I mean like people are talking about him at the end of the year as one of the better players in college football. I think he's that good, and because he's that big and he's that athletic. And with James Laurinaitis teaching him as well, because I think the world of James as a teacher of the position. James had such a great little kind of 2-minute talk about as he's learned, as he's grown in the position, he kind of forgets that like he knows so much about football, so much because he's done it, for a long time at the highest level at Ohio State, and going to the NFL and having a nice, productive, long career there, that sometimes he forgets how little they know as football players at their level, even being at Ohio State, that they still don't know, the game, even close to what he does. So as a teacher, James Laurinaitis, and what Arvell looks like, and just knowing, got the experience last year and we saw flashes of it. I think Arvell Reese could end up being one of the better players Ohio State has at the end of the year. Maybe one of the best players in college football. I'm that high on Arvell Reese.
Yeah, I mean, we've been here. We were saying this last year.
Yeah.
Like, this dude is on the cusp of superstardom. That's literally what I said. You didn't disagree with me. It was just a matter of how do you get him on the field.
Right. Yeah.
My only time in there, the leader of the defense, the block O in front of him and Mike.
Right. Yeah.
My dilemma to have.
My only contention last year was that I think Cody Simon's the best middle linebacker you have, and obviously Cody ended up proving to be, that. So that was my only contention. And I also, another thing that shouldn't be discounted as well is the fact, like the Matt Patricia effect as well, that he's going to have on Arvell, because we heard a little bit of James talking about it again last week. Matt Patricia's focus on just saying, these are the guys we have. How do we unleash these guys? And how do we make these guys, put these guys in positions to just go be playmakers? How do we do that? So that kind of mindset with a guy like Arvell Reese suggests to me that Arvell Reese is primed for a major year. They're going to put him in positions to just be the physical freak that he is.
So that's just it. I think that, and this was kind of my contention with, a lot of folks excited about what CJ Hicks can potentially do in different roles. I feel like Patricia's got his eyes on Arvell to be that weaponized piece that's doing a little specialized this or that. And I think that's the right decision, because I think of all the freaks on this team, he's maybe one of your freakiest at 6'4", 240, and the natural instinct in the way he hits, it's just different. It just is. It just all comes so natural to him. Even when he didn't know anything, he just looked like, oh my gosh, this guy's a hammer. In the way he closes space, which they've talked about, like, it's just different. So super excited about that. And I do want to get into, next time we talk, I'm going to put on my notes here a little bit of this linebacker recruiting, because there's a couple interesting tidbits I want to go over with you. But Dillon, that's all we got for today on my side. Do you have anything else you need to add?
No, I guess just one more quick thing. I just want to say the way James Laurinaitis talked about Sonny Styles, again, we're sitting here talking about Arvell and how big we are on him, and certainly the young guys and how big a bright a future they have as well. But the way James talked about Sonny Styles, somebody asked him, or referred to him as being the leader of the front seven or leader of the defense, and he said he thinks he's the leader. Sonny Styles is the leader of the team. So again, going back to the Blocko conversation, throw that out the window. He is your Blocko. He's going to be your Blocko. But for James Laurinaitis to sit there and said he thinks he's the leader of the team. We know Sonny took some lumps last year as he kind of was trying to learn the position. But once again, talk about physical freaks in year 2 of actually playing the position. Ohio State's in such an awesome spot at linebacker, at least at the front, and then hopefully with Payton Pierce there as well, a little bit of depth. So, but I was just the way he glowed about Sonny Styles, the leader, in addition to being the player, suggests that, Sonny Styles is primed for a big year as well. So,
son of a Buckeye linebacker, Ohio high school football legend, basketball legend, brother on the team, going to be a captain, going to be the Blocko. We'll see how high he goes in the NFL draft, but the way we've watched his leadership, the evolution of that, listening to him talking about just innately understanding who needs a kick in the rear end and who needs an arm around the shoulder. He's pretty much the perfect Buckeye, just like Cody was ahead of him. And it's pretty interesting that those two guys both coming out of James Laurinaitis' room. Says a lot about James, says a lot about them. I think it's awesome, but you're absolutely right. Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Talk to you next time.
Talk soon.
Yep.
And that'll do it for me and my buddy Dillon Davis. And we are going to start a segment, he and I, next time he comes on. You guys leave some interesting comments about Dillon, and we're going to have Dillon answer your comments. So if you've got any cool things to say, like Dillon needs to learn how to smile or something like that, like some of you guys like to say, drop them in the comments section, and I'm going to have Dillon answer them next time he's on. All right. Appreciate you guys. JUCK and Bucks out.